Now, it's conventional wisdom that the ticket, historically, to improving your job and prosperity prospects is a good education. Now, a good education in years past meant that you got through year 12 or school, you learn how to read and write and actually have some reason. For some, it also meant going on to university, and then you're almost guaranteed about getting a decent job. But today, none of that qualifies as a good education. It just means you've successfully navigated the system and you could actually still be as thick as a brick and have a qualification. One university lecturer told me that year 12 graduates now have the literacy and numeracy skills of a year 9 student of decades past. And I guess we also read a lot about the outperformance of girls in schools versus boys. It's, a pin-up for the gender wars. But I know firsthand the system is being gamed to help them perform better. You see, in many leading girls' schools, despite the rules for year 12 where you get to have a draft and then you submit a final report, students are actually allowed to submit multiple drafts of the same assignment until the final one receives very, very high marks. And it's no coincidence that in some schools where teachers sit on the examination panel for HSC or year 12, their students also get exceptional results. It's a remarkable coincidence. Unfortunately though, when these students get to uni, the spoon feeding stops and they often struggle with the requirements. And please, in higher education, do not get me started on the International Student Diploma Mill. It is a scandal in our universities. I mean, how you can graduate from an Australian university without speaking English makes the whole thing a joke. I mean, they're not giving out degrees in internet cut and paste skills, are they? Well, actually, maybe they are. Anyway, tonight's Talking Points memo sheds some light on how the education system is failing our kids and our finances. And here to help me go through them is political strategist Brigid Meney. Brigid, thanks for joining me. I'm going to start with point number 1. Total combined Australian government and state and territory funding per student has grown in real terms by 17% over the decade to 2017-2018. And yet at the same time, Commonwealth funding has grown in real terms by 48%. Our kids are getting dumber. Global literacy and numeracy rankings have been dropping. Is it because the states have dropped the ball in funding, or have they just given up on teaching our kids?
Well, look, shock horror that throwing more money at a problem doesn't necessarily fix it. And it certainly doesn't fix it when the foundations are wrong to begin with. I mean, you can attest, having been in Parliament yourself, that not every dollar that government spends money on is going out there to fix a problem. A lot of the time it's just going out there to look like you've fixed a problem. But, the fact that with all this money being thrown at it, we're still not able to compete within the OECD is frankly outrageous and should outrage every parent in Australia, given Australia's relative prosperity in the region.
Yeah, it's very true. I mean, let's talk about some of these rankings. And point number 2, UNICEF ranked Australia 39 out of 41 medium and high income countries for achieving quality education. Now, cheers that we beat Turkey and Romania, but 39 out of 41 is simply not good enough, is it?
It's absolutely not good enough. And I think that these are kind of the statistics that we don't always hear. With everything that's being done and the the amount of people we have working in the Department of Education to come up with this. But look, I honestly think that it speaks mostly to our inability to cater towards more disadvantaged students. I mean, these struggles aren't necessarily in well-to-do private schools. They're in the disadvantaged, and it's because the school system is so rigid. The curriculum is so rigid that it's completely unable to cater towards more disadvantaged students like our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students and students in rural and remote areas and low SES areas. Teachers are so weighed down with paperwork from bureaucracies in Canberra who probably rarely set foot in a classroom. They don't have the time to fight an inflexible system and leave no child behind.
Yeah, I get the sense, Brigid, that the education system has changed. Previously, if you weren't cutting the mustard, you were kept behind for a year until you could catch up or be with someone of a cohort and a peer group. But now they just keep promoting people through the system. And point number 3 is this. Only 71% of Australian 15-year-olds are actually achieving baseline standards in maths, reading and science ability. Now, that's an alarming statistic. 71% are achieving the baseline standards. What does that say to those who are falling behind and still getting to year 10 or whatever when they're 15 years of age?
Well, look, I think it's amazing that you're still willing to talk about the basics like maths and science in the current climate. I mean, you know, if we taught maths and science in the classroom, there'd be less time for, you know, critical race theory and working out, you know, whether the world's going to end in 9 years. So, you know, you're very much the traditionalist, I must say.
Oh, well, there's no surprise there. In fact, you know, last week we spoke about how maths is apparently holding people back and advanced maths is being removed from the curriculum because it advantages those who are smarter. But things are going to get worse, you know, because under the new overhauled national curriculum, this is point number 4, children are not going to be able to be taught how to tell the time until grade 2, so that's about when they're 7 or so, and no instruction is going to be given on how to multiply by, say, 2 and 5 and 10, the most basics in mathematics, until at year 4. That's a step in the wrong direction, surely.
It's completely a step in the wrong direction. And I think, you know, don't even get me started on the national curriculum. I think the only good thing I can possibly think is that maybe it's a political ploy by the government to do this in an election year so that they can kind of come out and smash it going into an election. Like, that's really all I can think that they might be trying to do as a Conservative government, because, you know, parents will be outraged at this the more they know about it.
Well, they should be, and unfortunately I'm going to get you started on the new curriculum because new teachings include the terms Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander are not appropriate, that Australia was invaded, and that they're going to be teaching kids the rules regarding sexting. Now, that's just the thing for the next bunch of brainwashed woke activists, isn't it? And apparently, before I get at your answer, this is all being driven due to the changing ways that students understand new concept. And I'd put to them this. Here's the thing. Maths, English and science are not new concepts. The gender fairy book, the anthropogenic global warming alarmism, the myth of multiple established nations on the Australian continent prior to European settlement, they're all new concepts. And I reckon they're a load of old cobblers, but that's my view. What's yours?
Oh, look, I think that it's not always what they teach, it's how they teach it as well. And I think that should concern parents. You know, when it comes to things like sexting or even how sexual education is taught in schools, sadly, parents have vacated the field. They've outsourced it to the schools to teach those values, you know, by not talking to their kids about consent. So if I can leave any message for parents watching tonight, it's that if you have appropriate age children at home, go home and talk to them about sex, go and talk to them about the values that you espouse around sex, go and talk to them about the legalities and the moralities around consent. Don't leave it to the schools.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I mean, I don't want to beat up on the teachers here because some of them do an outstanding job and they do positively influence young lives, right? It's amazing how much influence they can have. But being a teacher doesn't mean you replace a parent. Parents have to pick up the responsibilities of parenthood. They cannot outsource it to a school or government or a childcare worker or anyone else. Responsibility is the name of the game. And as parents walk away from that role, our kids are suffering exponentially, I think.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more, Cory.
Well, Brigid, I really appreciate you spending your Friday evening with me and the audience on Bernardi. Thanks so much for your time.
My pleasure. Have a good night.